Hi, I just wanted to talk about the new moon in Taurus, and I'm all Taurused out because I needed to really be able to ground today and take some time to rest and meditate on this. So the new moon will be in Taurus, which means the sun and the moon will be conjuncting Taurus. There really isn't too much else going on in relationship to them. If we look at the chart, there's essentially just a trine between the sun, moon, and Pluto over in Capricorn. So there isn't too much going there. So what it really allows us for is a very pure experience of Taurus. And I like to relate this to the last new moon where we really planted the seed for how can we make our passions a reality, right? How can we bring our passions into the world? And so Taurus will be the energy that we use to really embody this. And so part of the question for this is for the new moon, how will we really invoke this Taurus energy to create the resources that we need to bring our passion into the world? And then as we work with this waning moon, what do we need to release to open up the door to those resources? And where I really came to with this is I was meditating over this, and I've talked a lot about Taurus beings, the and Taurus energy being so intimately related with our body because it's intimately related with the physical reality. And I believe that the full moon was and Scorpio was a great way to work with that relationship of the body and our emotions, right? Of the body and our emotions, previous traumas, and the way that we disassociate from our body and to overcome these things and to really get back into our bodies because it's a great way to work with that Taurus energy. But that's only a piece of the puzzle, right? Taurus is the first earth element in the zodiac, and she naturally rules over the second house. And so we've got her over here. Taurus naturally rules over the second house. She is ruled over by Venus, and she's a fixed sign. So she's the earthiest of the earth signs, right? Earth energy is all about stability. It's all about that that connection to the physical reality. In the astrological tradition, we have fire, air, water, and earth. And so this physical reality is just as important of an aspect as that spiritual reality of fire, that emotional reality of water, and that mental reality of air. And so as I was meditating with this, and meditating like, okay, what am I going to do a little talk on with the new moon, and what am I going to be focusing on, and what would I like to draw people's attention to? Really what came up for me was this split that occurs oftentimes is people who are either working in self-development or in spiritual communities. There's oftentimes a split between that spiritual self-development and feeling okay and comfortable in physical reality. um, and so I was sitting with this and I'm like, okay, why is this? Like, what is coming up? And I think, I think books and books and books and books could be written on this, but the things that came up for me, because I know that I experienced this personally myself, is that it's very similar to that narrative of why do we disassociate from our bodies, right? So why are we disassociating from the life around us, from the physical world around us? A lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about money, talking about um, really wanting to create the stability of having a good house, like, right, having a nice house, getting very connected to the physical world. Taurus is all about that. It's all about our resources. It's all about how we provide for ourselves and take care of ourselves. And you see all of that in the second house. Second house rules over our possessions, and like I pointed out in the my videos on Taurus, those are things that we own, like parts of our personality or parts of our identity, but those are also things that we own very real and very physically. And it's pretty popular in today's spiritual traditions to oftentimes put this wedge between spirituality and the physical world. And what was coming up with me with this meditation is uh, how this seems to be a disassociation process. Very much like when people experience trauma or people experience a lot of stress, we disassociate from our bodies. We're no longer feeling into our bodies. And this tends to create unhealthy behaviors from anything from addictions and or like cigarette smoking or uh, binging on alcohol in order to not have to pay attention to our bodies, to overeating because we're fixated on having a certain physical experience rather than actually allowing ourselves to experience our day in, day out relationship of our bodies. And so we my partner had to take care of her physical body by getting some water. So we had a brief pause. So yeah, when we experience stress, when we experience trauma, we try to disassociate. That mind naturally starts to disassociate from our bodies because it's too uncomfortable. And I think this is really that aspect of what we do when people start to divide the physical world or realm from the spiritual realm is it's an act of disassociating, right? We start to downplay the physical existence in the physical realm, which is what Taurus is really all about. And we start to upplay spiritual practices or enlightenment or anything that gets us, like any of these concepts that we have that get us out of the physical world. And in particular, people start to play into a lot more of the other elements of the chart, right? They start to play into the elements of fire and that kind of visionary element, or the elements of water and that sort of emotional, intuitive world, or they play into the mental realms, right? It all becomes just these mental explorations of ourselves, or concepts of the world around, but not the actual physical world around. And I think it's because the physical world, it has so much beauty, it has so much fantastic experiences, and it also produces a lot of pain and a lot of trauma. And in older spiritual traditions, those things were seen to just go hand in hand, right? Pretty much every single ancient tradition saw the world as having the good and the bad, right? And spiritual practice typically involved recognizing all of that, right? And in almost every ancient tradition, a part of interacting with the spiritual realm was was blessed by the spiritual realm, was said to be blessed by the spiritual realm, and blessed through things like abundance, right? The Torah, for instance, has like constant talk about how blessings from God being and your wine vats will be overflowing, right? And your fields will be filled with ripe crops, and you'll have all this cattle, and you'll have this blessing, this material existence. And you see that throughout pagan traditions, right? Is asking for the blessings of the gods on crops and harvests, and and the god blesses you for your spiritual practice in this physical reality. And you see that in different Hindu traditions where that was a big thing. And you see that in Buddhist traditions, right? Where in a lot of Buddhist traditions, if people aren't looking to reach nirvana yet, then what they do is they work on improving their karmic merit in order to have a better next life, right? The ancient traditions, the householder tradition of Hinduism, where you raise your family, you work hard to have a good, healthy physical existence, and then near the end of life, you start really working for your next existence, right? You might release all your possessions and start meditating a lot more, go into the jungle. But all the ancient traditions had a way of working with the physical reality, of acknowledging that the physical reality has its good and it has its bad, and acknowledging that the good and the bad both are part of that divine experience and part of this physical experience. And I wanted to pull up some quotes with that. For instance, Isaiah chapter 45:7, God is talking to Isaiah from the half Torah, or the Old Testament, and he says, "I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things." There was acceptance for the pleasant and the unpleasant as being part of the natural human experience, being part of the natural physical experience, and being part of the natural spiritual experience. From the pyramid texts of Egypt, there is this text from Bat, who is this cow goddess. And so I had no idea, honestly, where to go with today's video. And I was like meditating on it. I'm like, okay, we've talked a lot about the body, but like that's only a part of Taurus energy. Like Taurus energy is where your finances, how's your housing, what kind of, like, how are the clothes that you're wearing? It's so much more. And I didn't know how to really bridge these gaps. And so I started working and reading on my writing that I do every year, and it follows the seasons and the cycles. And I came to this point where I was talking about this Egyptian goddess Bat, and I think that came up last year for me. And she's related to Hathor, and Hathor and Bat are both they're both cow goddesses. And so they already immediately relate to that image of Taurus and Taurus the bull. And they're deeply connected to the earth and deeply connected to this physical reality, right? Bat, for instance, tends to be represented a lot with music and enjoyment and festivals like that. And they're both interesting enough depicted in a lot of the Egyptian wall paintings and reliefs. Typically, the gods and goddesses are in side profile, right? So they're depicted in side profile along with people and characters. But Bat and Hathor will oftentimes be depicted facing straight at you, right? And so what I interpreted from that is like physical reality faces straight at you, right? You're constantly exposed to it. And so in this pyramid text, Bat is quoted as saying, I am praise, I am majesty, I am Bat with her two faces. I am the one who is saved, and I have saved myself from all things evil. And what that really spoke to me was this aspect of meeting physical reality, embracing physical reality, and really bringing in this aspect of praise and spiritual vitality into the physical reality, which is what I think we get from that cycle of Aries. And this passion, this fiery energy has to have a vessel. It has to have this physical reality, right? That energy and that passion and that fire, that spiritual fire that can be here with Aries, has to have a physical reality in order to be made manifest, right? And so we have to play in this physical realm. And when we allow ourselves to disassociate from that, when we allow ourselves to say like, oh no, this is just the world and the world is not that great, and I'm looking for the spiritual, we are no longer allowing ourselves to actually imbue the physical world with the spiritual world, right? We're creating a divide between these two elements, these two parts that need to be unified, they need to be brought together. We talked a lot about Scorpio and the Scorpio full moon. We talked a lot about alchemy and how not only were alchemists trying to change lead to gold, and in a more spiritual context, trying to really gain that state of oneness, but they were looking to create the Philosopher's Stone, which was seen as really continuing the work to imbue physical reality with that awareness of its divine oneness, right? For Christian alchemists, they saw Christ as being the salvation of humanity. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to take that salvation of humanity that was performed through the crucifixion of Christ, and imbue the rest of existence with it, really unite that divine nous or that divine mind with all physical reality. And that's what we can do with Taurus, right? When we start to really allow ourselves to enter into the physical reality, when we stop disassociating from it, when we embrace the pain and the joy of it, when we're able to very clear-eyed see, like, yes, like there's pain, there's suffering, and there's joy, and there's delight, then we can more effectively start to really use ourselves as a channel to imbue the physical reality with the spiritual property, and to really combine in this work of alchemy the four elements within us. And another thing that came up in the meditation is that obviously it's a lot more than just material world, right? When we're looking to plant the seeds for the new moon, what we're going to want to do is really plant the seeds for generating and creating the resources and the abundance we need to be able to manifest our passions, these things that are really driving us, this purpose in life, into the world. We're going to need resources. Um, we're going to need some abundance to do that. But the end all message isn't all about abundance, right? That's the other swing of the pendulum in today's society, is that prosperity gospel of like, yeah, you deserve it, have everything you want. I don't think that's really, there are other aspects of the zodiac that build um, other levels of mindfulness around that, right? Like Virgo would then challenge us, like, yeah, like, cool, abundance is great. She rules over the harvest, but like, how are you putting that into service for other people, right? Aquarius is going to ask, like, how are we serving the rest of humanity with this, right? What's the big picture of this? And so I wanted to take note of that, right? We need to be able to embrace physical reality. We need to be able to embrace physical reality. We need to really be able to embrace abundance. We need to be able to embrace gathering the resources that we really need to do what we're meant to do in our lives. I know that's been my mantra lately. Is I need more resources. I need more resources, and money is a resource in order to do what I really need to do. And I'm working at that, and I'm working at it in a very practical Taurus way, where I'm applying myself to this each day. Um, and that is an important thing to, I know I've had to do a lot of work on that, because I grew up excessively poor, in a family that was all about serving people, emotionally and spiritually, and sacrificed that physical, earthy stability. And so growing up, all I wanted was that earthy stability. I still wanted to connect to people emotionally and spiritually, but like, I wanted to be a lawyer that like had plenty of money and resources, because I saw my family like suffer a lot from not having resources, and I saw fights in the family all the time because of the limited amount of resources. And so that's all I wanted. And then when I started working more on my spiritual life and re-exploring that, then it was like, oh, money is the root. I started thinking money was the root of all problems, right? Because I was looking into capitalism and colonialism and all these aspects of how money is used to oppress people. And wanted to do away with it. And now I'm coming back as I'm doing this more well-rounded work with astrology, like, and in other spiritual aspects of life. I'm realizing, like, no, I like actually need to cultivate these resources so I can do what I actually need to do here. And so we want to be able to cultivate that, and the new moon is going to be the thing that we cultivate that in. It's going to be the perfect place to plant that seed. Uh, I do want to, however, balance that with the fact that I don't think it's all about the abundance and resources in the way that has become pretty popular too, in certain spiritual groups and abundance groups. There are other levels of there are other aspects of the zodiac world, right? The zodiac chart that ask us, how do all these things interrelate, right? And so we want to keep those in mind. But here in Taurus season, it is a little bit more about getting your resources, right? Taurus is a little bit more about like, yeah, but actually let's get what we need to get. And we can worry about how, not worry, but we can figure out how to solve the problems of society later, and we can figure out how to bring service to our fellow man with Virgo right now. Let's gather some things in. But as people who are working to be well-rounded, we want to be aware of all that, right? And I just simply couldn't get up here and be like, yes, like just reach for endless abundance and not pay attention to social justice um, and to the needs of others and to the needs of a greater community and society. I feel it's part of our duty to pay attention to all of that and to interact in all of that and to serve all of that. But it is easier to serve all of that when we have the resources we need to take care of ourselves, and to not only survive but to thrive, so that we have more of an ability to interact, and to make greater change in social justice and to greater change, and making sure that other people are well cared for and provided for. And so as I was going through these meditations, that seemed to be the main mark, right? Is the new moon, how do we plant the seed? Or what is it that we need to call in to make sure that we have the resources we need to go forward and fulfill our passions, our drive in life, the reason why we're here. What resources do we need? What systems do we need to create to fulfill this? And then as the moon is waning, what do we need to release that gets in the way of that, right? What gets in the way of that, right? Do we maybe sometimes waste some of our resources, overspending on things that we don't need to? Is it a fear of money, right? Is it a disconnect between our idea of living a good life spiritually and a repulsive attitude against against wealth and resources? Is it a matter of fears of launching things that can bring in more resources, right? Is it, there's a whole bunch of things, right, that can get in the way of these resources. For me, it's still definitely a part of overcoming that split between what is the idea of what is spiritual and what is physical, and recognizing like, no, really big part of that task, because I thoroughly believe this, but sometimes there's still unconscious things that come up. A big part of that task is imbuing the physical with the spiritual, or awakening the physical to the spiritual, right? And you see that in the older traditions. It's why I love Judaism as one of the traditions, is that's a big theme of Judaism, is to bring heaven to earth, essentially. And it's a big theme in Hinduism, and blessings and ways to invoke the world was a big thing in the ancient traditions too. So I just wanted to pass that along and really challenge people to go through and see, like, is there a schism in your mind and your perception of the spiritual realm and the physical realm, or how you relate to the physical realm, and what are you going to plant to call in with that new moon, to gather the resources you need, and what are you going to release that gets in the way of you gathering the resources that you need? Okay, great. Thank you. You have a great day. Bye.